Morning. Welcome to Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session for Monday, December 16th, 2024. It is 10:03 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. All commissioners seated to my left, Vice Chair Commissioner Fournier, Commissioner Mejia, Commissioner Edwards, Commissioner Klaus. I see Commissioner-elect Grant joining us on Zoom. Thank you. We have County Manager Leonard Hernandez and Assistant County Managers Rob Gelder and Robin Campbell, our Budget Director Summer Miller as well. So various topics this morning. First, public virtual attendance available on our YouTube channel. We have a 2-hour session to cover the agenda, and the first item is Commissioner engagement in CPED processes. Vice Chair Fournier.
Sorry, before we adopt this agenda or put I wanted to see if we could add in here. We just got an email titled Workplace Concerns. See if we can make a place for a discussion of that email on the agenda today.
I would have to know more, not having seen the email.
I don't know what the process is, but we haven't been requiring motions to just walk things on. In the future, I'd like to do that, but we haven't adopted that as like a protocol yet.
You can raise it as a commissioner item if you like.
Okay, so maybe
falls under 3. We'll just add it up after 7.
Okay, so item 8, workplace concerns.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll start with commissioner engagement and CPED processes. County Manager.
Thanks so much. Commissioners, there was some questions about a meeting that Commissioner Klaus requested on Friday with land applicants and committee members. And, there was, I think, some confusion and even misinformation or misrepresentation that Josh Cummings authorized the meeting with the land applicants and the committee members, which he did not. So after working that through, there was some outreach to other commissioners that took place by folks involved in that meeting, and necessitated Josh Cummings and myself to work with Travis to get a perspective on if there was anything inappropriate taking place. And so I appreciate Travis's recommendation that we just all sit down and have this conversation so that we can balance the different perspectives. I just want to make it clear that I think it's really important that commissioners do not communicate to land applicants or the public that staff is providing direction or authorizing meetings when in fact they have not. I think that gives the wrong signal, potentially puts staff in an awkward situation. With that being said, kind of open it up now to commissioners who had some questions about that level of engagement, and staff are here to help answer. I just want to note that Ashley is back a day early from vacation to participate in this conversation. I really appreciate her sacrifice and her leadership to make this a priority so that we are giving the board and individual commissioners the best advisement as possible. So with that, open it up to see if there's any questions from commissioners.
I'd like to go ahead and start since this has to do with a meeting that I set up. And just to, for the record, correct a statement that was made. I did not ever at any point email a constituent and let them know that Josh had authorized this meeting. In fact, I believe Commissioner Mincer was in the room with me when I asked Josh about this, and the exact verbatim statement that Josh had given me was that this meeting doesn't conflict with or run afoul on the process. Commissioner Mincer was there with me when he said that, and I made sure to convey that message verbatim to the constituents. So to open up with a statement about there being confusion or miscommunication or any sort of statement that Josh had authorized, this meeting is incorrect. So I just wanted to start with that. And I'd like to be able to have a collaborative conversation on what opportunities there are for commissioner involvement in the process, especially when there are community members that are coming forward and speaking about concerns or asking questions, rather than like kind of setting the tone for like, oh, a commissioner was confused and conveyed an incorrect message. So I just want to start with that, because I think that this is, you know, our land use decisions are one of the most important parts of the role of being a commissioner. And so I think that understanding that role is really important. So I just want to kind of start by maybe shedding a different kind of light on this and making it more of an opportunity rather than, oh, someone did something out of confusion, so.
I was just gonna say, if there wasn't confusion, we wouldn't have this room full of people right now to talk about it. So let's acknowledge that there had to have been some kind of confusion somewhere, and then maybe we can figure that out.
I would just like to point out that the importance of whatever did or did not happen, but on land use issues, the county lost a $16 million lawsuit that stemmed out of 2013. It was called the Maytown case. It was finally adjudicated completely, I think, in 17. And that came about because a commissioner got, well, I guess more than one got their involvement from a personal perspective and got outside the process. So that ended up being adjudicated in the Washington State Supreme Court, and the ruling was 9-0 against Thurston County. You know, that leaves no doubt that we made some mistakes during that. So I think it's very important that we at least make sure we do things right and not get out of our line, I guess is the best way to put it.
That is a conflation of two completely different scenarios, and if that's the impression that you have, Commissioner Edwards, and that you're going to express to this board, then we have a lot of confusion, and we need Travis to go over it with us, because my understanding is that issue was about commissioner interference and setting conditions of a permit. Land use issues are, as I understand it, because I went over this in great detail with Elizabeth Petridge when I first joined the board, commissioners have absolute latitude to meet with the applicants. It's not an appearance of fairness issue. It's not an anything kind of issue. I routinely do it. I've had multiple meetings with, let's take Bar Holdings. I've had multiple meetings with the developer. I've had multiple meetings with the citizen group. I've had multiple meetings with, in the last set of Grand Mound things, I went down with the Arnolds and toured their property. I've had multiple meetings with the Black Lake Quarry group. So if there's an issue that those meetings are going to create the multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the county that Commissioner Edwards is suggesting, we better get to the bottom of that right now. I'm going to look to Travis to
Just as a follow-up to that, what I'm referring to is personal agendas that get interjected into the process that we're obligated to follow.
What does that
That's
mean?
what I'm referring to.
What is a person? You meet with someone about to hear what they have to say. That's a personal agenda.
No.
If Commissioner Klaus wants to meet with the residents that live around there, she has a personal agenda. Yeah, the agenda is listening to your constituents. I don't understand that issue at all, Vice Chair.
I hear what you're saying, and I would say that if we have a prescribed process and we're holding public hearings as a board, and the county speaks to the citizens from us as a board, I would see danger if there's an appearance that something else is being created and you're creating a secondary, parallel public comment process that isn't being facilitated by staff, isn't properly public noticed, isn't supported by staff, but there's an illusion given that it's supported by staff. You're creating potentially a secondary quasi process that makes it look like the county has authorized it, but it's an unauthorized public comment period that you're holding within the atrium where you may have cherry-picked commentators, and then you can't pretend that is our process when we've had a 10-year process that is openly, collectively, facilitated through professional staff, something that is sterile, and then we sit as somewhat of an, supposed to be like an unbiased party to weigh in on these based on the public comments that are legitimately gathered
Okay,
You know,
I'll-
like that's where I would see,
I have
you
to
know, like,
stop you right there. It legitimately got, I mean, we've all, and I think you and I have both sat on the dais and said, this whole fascination with the public comment, you know, things like, we're always saying, you can reach us, like, I know you've
Yeah,
said, like,
yeah.
we're the most available in the history of
Yeah.
like local government. Like, I can be reached anytime, anywhere. I can be email, I'll respond. So like, sometimes when certain public members of the public get like fixated on this public hearings, like, we are always taking public comment. And that's just part of what it is. Now, again, county manager's point, there needs to be absolute clarity about this is something that staff has set up, or this is part of an official process. But as long as it's clear that it's an individual commissioner going out and listening or thing, I don't see a problem with that. And again, I don't know that that's what the county manager's saying.
Yeah, and Chair, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this meeting, there was outreach to commissioners outside of my engagement. There's outreach to staff from some of the applicants who don't really want to be named because they're kind of like, we want to stay out of it. But there was that level of confusion. And so there was comments made about an email being sent out that was saying, staff said that you can have this. So what I'm trying to do, and I believe what Travis was trying to do, is to facilitate a conversation where we can get clarity so that everyone is on the same page, we can move forward without there being concern.
Let's go to Travis then.
Yeah, I'd be happy to try to frame the conversation. I think it's helpful to know where those boundaries are. There are, I think as Leonard is describing, a need to be in a coordinated effort to try to ensure that the process is clear. But in terms of your discretion, in terms of what you do legislatively, there's a big difference between a quasi-judicial decision and a legislative decision. In fact, courts have recognized your legislative function as being inherently political, right? And so that does not require necessarily you could listen to one constituent over another. You can listen to more than one. That's really up to the board's prerogative to sort out. At the end of the day, the quasi-judicial requirements have a prohibition towards ex parte communications. There's an appearance of fairness requirement, and those are, like the decision in U.S. Truck. That was the last one you all saw an appeal from the hearing examiner. It also comes up in the context of RUEs on appeal. Those settings are different, and the way you conduct yourselves with the public and citizens is an entirely different box and a way of thinking. So it's important to first recognize this conversation is in the guise of legislation. This is set up as a legislative process. I think, a number of years ago, at least 7 or 8 years, it was on the preliminary docket and then continued to get put on the active docket at some point in time. Where I think this body could benefit was through a conversation where you can decide collectively, how are we going to, the moment, there's a lot of discretion here, but the moment that you have a number of board members that are disagreeing with the way that you're using resources, the way that you're engaging the public through any kind of, public meeting, I think at that point, it does require a little bit more consensus building in terms of what this body wants out of its legislative process. And, it's one thing to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm available, but, to the extent that you get to a point where you're having workshops, engaging staff for additional time, that is a point where I think a collective discussion is necessary to get the direction from the board and to be able to move in a way that meets your legislative priorities. So that first thing is there's a distinction between a quasi-judicial setting and a legislative one. We're in the legislative bucket here. And then with those boundary, those kind of constrictions, I think that's a point of time where you all can deliberate and decide how you want to move forward, right? With this particular, and staff I'm sure would have some input as well in terms of what they've done over the years to engage the public. But that's the framework we're working within, for better or worse.
Josh, do you care to?
Thank you. That's helpful context from our prosecuting attorney. And just to expound on the conversation, I think it's important for context, recognizing that we are in the legislative portion of this decision-making process. Conversation with Commissioner Klaus and Commissioner Minzer was, what can I do? Can we have staff join this meeting? And my response essentially was, commissioners have wide berth on these topics as they come before you, this land use rezone discussion, but to stay far away from any line that could have got us into hot water previously. I relayed that staff will not be at that meeting. And so that was the conversation that took place between the commissioners and myself was, this is a legislative item. Commissioners have the opportunity to go out and engage their constituents, but to stay clear of any appearance of unfairness or a process change, staff would not be at that meeting. And at that point, the commissioners agreed that that would be the path forward. Independently, I did receive input from the folks that were applying that provided their perspective that it was an odd thing that this has gone through a process. One of the applicants had been a decade in line, 10 years. And we've gone through multiple steps of process, public hearings and all sorts of different comment periods. And that 3 days before there was a discussion on it, they were frustrated that this was gonna happen. And of course, they weren't going to say no to a commissioner's request, but there was a hint of, not a hint, a direct statement of being a little frustrated with the process. So that's all happening all independently. And then another commissioner comes to us and says, I've heard this same thing from the applicant. Can you run it to ground with legal? Legal provided their perspective that this is a legislative item, and we were correct. I was correct in the statement to the commissioners that you have wide berth to engage, but that it would be a good idea for the board to come together and have this conversation about how the process works. And so I think that, just to reset the table, there is, as provided guidance through Travis, given this is a legislative issue, you can engage your constituents. However, out of respect for the entire board, how does that process work? At the last 3 days before a vote is to be taken, bringing all the folks together in a room together, folks that may be frustrated with the application, the applicants themselves, how do commissioners want to engage your constituents on that topic? And so that's where staff backs away, because this is a conversation for the board, not for the staff to interject our perspective.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, I think the confusion might just be about between the people involved, the applicant or whatever, about whether this was Commissioner I mean, because I would think that this was about her vote, you know, like all of us have to decide how to vote. Sometimes I don't know till the last day how I'm gonna vote.
Totally.
If I'm out there thinking like, you know what, I want to hear again from so-and-so, you know, like I may, and that person doesn't have to have that meeting. If they don't want that opportunity to sway my vote, you know, they don't have to take that meeting. That can't be, I mean, it's a problem if that's misunderstood, if somehow the board's process or the board needed to hear from these applicants again in a way like, I don't know how clear you were about, this was about you wanting to hear in terms of considering how you're gonna vote on the matter. That's clarity that I think is needed.
Can I just interject? I mean, one of the thoughts that pop up in my brain is just, it's boils down to, in part, the optics are just as important as the process. And if you have a process that is established and there's that reliability for the public as they are engaging in that process. They know that it works from the concept, from the application, through the planning commission, through the board. You have a hearing, you receive the testimony, you cut it off. And because that's what they understand, and then if someone else is getting an additional bite at the apple, then you have actually shifted the integrity of the process. Yeah, and so that I think is just as important as the sort of, you know, the latitude of one's legislative authority versus quasi-judicial.
I just have a couple of things to say. You know, this has been a very long one. This public process has been happening all year. I know I've engaged with different constituents from the Grand Mound area. We went through UGM. We had how many open houses in Grand Mound?
3 over the course of the project and 3 individual mailings.
Let's actually do that real quick. The outreach is important. Do you mind if she goes through the outreach?
Yeah, so these projects have been part of the Grand Mound Sub-Area Plan update that also took place over that timeframe. And so they were always at every open house, all the notices that went out, like the 500-foot notices, those were also sent out for these specific proposals as we were doing the sub-area plan update that got voted on and passed last year. So 3 open houses, 3 site-specific mailings to the, well, unless they moved, same residents that were notified this last go-around. 2 different story maps, staff updates provided down there in Grand Mound to study, Rochester Chamber. And then we also, just the open public meetings and hearings, we've had planning commission review and recommendation, 6 work sessions just in 2022, 2023, and a planning commission meeting late in 2022. We had board review of the planning commission recommendation that happened in May 2023. Board public hearing on the sub-area plan in September 2023. Public hearing on Grand Mound West land use rezoning UG amendments that happened in October of this year. BOCC briefings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 from summer 2023 to now, focused on just the Grand Mound West. And then, of course, there was the UGM subcommittee meetings, and there was one in June and then again in December of last year.
You heard from the public that there hadn't been enough outreach. I would offer that staff has gone above and beyond in terms of the outreach on this process. But the question remains to the board in terms of how you'd like the process to go forward. And Commissioner Mejia was.
Yeah, and so I'll just keep kind of going down. I don't think, for me at least, the concern is not engaging with constituents. I think as individual commissioners, we have every right to engage with constituents, whether it's for or against, whatever rezone amendment comes in front of the board. Where my concern lies is the landowner reaching out and saying, like, there's something here. And so I'm looking towards Travis, like, when we're talking about that, is there any kind of potential liability when it comes to that? And maybe that's not something we can answer in an open session, but I'm just, is there something where we have to, clarify the process a little bit more right towards the end? So it's clear, or?
Well, clarity is always to the benefit to your lawyers when we're establishing a record, right? That's always a good practice, is clear process is good process. In terms of, this happens a lot, and this is a good thing to think about, is especially your more significant, engaged sort of land use decisions. You do get a lot of rapid fire near the end. And oftentimes, there's a potential legal question that springs up. I think this happens more than we'd like it to, but that's how business rolls, right? Before you deliberate, whether you get that through public comment in your final hearing or through outreach, my suggestion is that you do get that to legal to decide, hey, does this change our outcome legally? Because oftentimes I'm evaluating as the form, I'm having conversations with staff when it gets presented to you as an option. A lot of times you'll have 4 options, 5 options, and I'm making sure that you're all working with an area that is above board. But on occasion, there's a new fact that comes to light that may change the legal setting. And in all those situations, if there is any concern, I would encourage you all to get it to your county manager and to me, any kind of legal question you might have. And it may be as easy as, hey, it's not an issue, right? Or it may be as easy as something that staff can answer off the cuff and say, hey, that they're looking at the wrong code, right? That happens oftentimes. But certainly as information becomes known during the end of the legislative process, I do encourage you to continue to have that open dialogue with legal counsel or staff to ensure that you're in the right place. And I'm speaking in hypotheticals. Maybe you have a...
Yeah, I'm thinking of an example. This is obviously the extreme example. It's like a docket item's been there forever, and it was part of the sub-area plan, and it was wrapped in with all, you can't come up with another example like this one.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about the one where we had the joint plan and Lacey, and like, there were 3 or 4 things in it, and one of them was a rezone of basically the same idea. It was like denser zoning right around, and then at the 11th hour, the neighbors all came in and said, you shouldn't do this, drive around the property, you're gonna mess everything up. And I did go and drive around the property, and the board, I believe, flipped the vote on that, and we did something slightly different based on that 11th hour input. And you could say, we shouldn't have done that, Commissioner. This has been going on, the joint plan had been worked on for 7 years, and this is all at the 11th hour, and what right do you have to go drive around the property and actually gather facts before you make a decision? But I would have never thought that that would have required me to call you. So what is it that would be a red flag where you're saying, if you have any question, call legal? Like where would I look for a question like that when there's an 11th hour new fact?
Commissioner, I can get to you in a moment. I just wanted to quickly
Yeah.
answer. I think what you described was a policy concern that weighed into your decision, not legal, right?
Yeah.
This is new information that you considered as a one person on the board making a legislative decision. Situation I would say would come up and say, hey, actually, what we didn't realize is that, I'm throwing out a complete hypothetical. This is not, let me be very clear, this is not going on in this process, but let's say they're in the ag overlay and there's some prohibition that somehow didn't allow you to take this action. And someone raised that issue. That may be something we'd want to analyze legally before you took action. So in your scenario, new information, and by the way, I think the majority of issues that come up are often policy. It's hey, did you really consider this? Did you know that this road, and I'll say staff are pretty darn good, as you know. I mean, they review this stuff in pretty good detail, but nobody's perfect. But anyway, there's a difference between a policy information, legal information. In any event, if there are concerns that come late in the process, it is your prerogative to move forward. I think what we're talking about process-wise is sort of the question of, do we want to continue to hunt and look for potential things that may frustrate the process, right? And this is a policy call. At what point is it enough investigation or review of the application or the variety of options where you feel comfortable moving forward as a body? And it would be reasonable if the board were to decide to say, hey, this is how we want to structure the process of information gathering, right? Which is a little bit different about, hey, we just learned this new information. Now I've got a different view. Commissioner, I didn't mean to cut into your question.
The board members were aware that if this gets into legal advice, that you advise that we should go into executive session. So just want to make sure that you feel comfortable if we need to cross that line at any time.
So I just to that point, this is all hypothetical.
Right.
All right. So this is the moment we're talking about, thank you, County Manager. The moment we're talking about this specific proposal and the pieces of that will need to shift, and I would recommend then going into an exec. So
The strategy of hunting and looking for, ways to, I guess, question the process or to to just hunt and look for problems. That can be a strategy that an individual policymaker can employ politically to, undermine the process or jam up the machinery. That's fine. That's not a new thing. And there's no problem. I don't think anybody has a problem with, say you want to set up the Sweet Hall and have a town hall and meet with, individual property owners that collectively, oppose or propose or whatever. There's no issue there. To me, there's an issue if there's an illusion given that there's some type of, government apparatus convening a secondary bite at the apple, if you will, like Josh said, then, if you're giving the illusion to land use applicants that there's some questions being raised that the county wants to suss out, that's different than an individual legislator setting up time to work with constituents. To me, that's where it gets hairy, because the county itself has this prescribed process, and the landowners, no matter what side of the fence they're on, whether the applicants who are people that have properties and property rights and have rights to due process as we've got it laid out, or the people on the other side of the fence that don't like it. They have rights to the same due process. It's when we create some unauthorized process that has the appearance of being authorized and you're, maybe misrepresenting what staff's intention were, and it appears to be a summons of, permit applicants to appear at the county. That's where it gets weird, and I think that's where if we don't put up guardrails against that kind of thing or address it, 2 years from now, we do end up in the same type of scenario like Commissioner Edwards was talking about in the $16 million, lawsuit. So those are my thoughts. Maybe there's a lot too many thoughts. I don't know.
Commissioner Edwards.
Did this, meeting take place here at the atrium? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
And there a lot of folks here? I don't know anything
Yeah,
about it.
I can provide some context around this for, so we don't have to keep talking hypotheticals.
Commissioner, I may interject
Oh, go
quick.
ahead.
This may be an appropriate time to get into an executive session so we can have this conversation in confidence at this point,
Okay.
if that's okay with you all.
Sure. I mean, just the description of the meeting, does that need to be, I know if we start to
No.
discuss legalities regarding such, we might.
I'm
need to-
anticipating a question coming out of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would request that Commissioner-elect Rachel Druyon be allowed into this executive session.
I'd second that.
What's wrong with that?
It's great.
Rob and Josh, if you could stay, I'll excuse Robin. And what you could
Our
say as well.
citation.
Couldn't tell you.
Under what? Under what?
Maybe we'll pull it up.
Okay, I'll just. Well, I can probably just.
Pending litigation.
Commissioner Grant?
you through the process and all of that, so that's kind of why I thought it would be good for her to join.
But she could get a briefing from council at a later date.
Yeah, I'll encourage her to do
Morty,
that.
that's a good idea.
I'll give her my big fat 1,000-page closest government to the people book.
It's a breeze, right?
That gets you started, and then I had questions for Elizabeth from
It's
that.
a great resource, yeah.
It's a good book.
All right, we're back on.
Okay, so we're about to go into a fairly brief executive session. We're estimating 15 minutes. It's pursuant to RCW 423110I to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency governing body or member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. And so it is 10:40. We'll be back at 10:55 unless there's a needed extension. And we'll wait for the shutdown and then we'll get going. Thank you. It's 10:56 a.m. We've completed the executive session. There's no legislative action to follow that. We may be done with topic number one. Was there more items that commissioners would like to address before we move? County Manager, do you think we've covered what you intended to cover? Go ahead and finish your answer, and then I'll go to Commissioner.
Yeah, I just think that, and hearing this play out, my perspective is that this meeting came together with short notice. Our staff were approached, and I don't know that they had full context. This caused a level of confusion and concern. I think we need to slow things down so that we can get full context, because I wasn't aware that one of the applicants was asking specifically to have one of my staff members to okay something, and I'm not sure if they fully understood the context of that. And so when we're having these on-the-fly conversations without able to slow down and give the full context, I think that's where the confusion can stem from. And it'd be my hope to avoid that. Because what I'm also responding to is the fact that some of there was outreach to staff about concerns about the meeting. And so now I understand why those concerns arose, because there's thinking staff are saying, yes, they're authorizing to do something without a full context of what was going on. So I think it's just an opportunity for us to have a learning lesson as we move forward. But you're right, Commissioner Menzer, this is a very unique situation with a lot behind it. And so I understand the complexity of it.
Appreciate that. Anything else we'd like to put on the record, Commissioner Mejia?
Yeah, I think that just based on Travis's recommendation that we should continue to clarify the process, and I'm not sure if is something that staff can provide recommendations, especially towards like the end of these land use, and especially for kind of the role of the board and what to do. So that would be my recommendation, but I'm one commissioner.
Well, the role of the board and
And our engagement, yeah.
individual members of
Yes.
the board as well, I think.
Yes.
Travis, anything you wanted to say outside of executive session to wrap this up for us?
I think, yes, I think, clarity's good. I think this is an important conversation to understand what's going on. And I would say that there is nothing nefarious going on here. That, the board has been receptive to the public. They've moved the process moving forward. I think the key is what county manager is mentioning, which is the coordination with resources and how we're functioning. And, just something to learn from, something to think about in terms of how the board is governing as a body. And I don't necessarily think, there was nothing wrong here, but there's always an opportunity to improve that. That's my perspective after hearing the conversation.
And lastly, Chair, I think Rob's perspective about optics are important. That
That's good.
If I could append to that a little bit, I think just another example that popped up into my brain was really around when we were having the conversations, the board was having the conversations around the forest conversion change, right? That we went through a very robust, multi-year stakeholder process that had 20 plus 40?
Almost 40
stakeholders as part of that. It went through the whole legislative process. Planning Commission came to the board, had a hearing, and then there were a whole bunch more conversations following when the hearing and the record was closed. And then there was additional kind of work or refinement done that did not engage or re-engage that entirety of the stakeholder group. So that we had, I think, that ended up hearing last minute concerns from some of them of not being engaged. And then it took that much more effort to get it over the finish line because we wanted to make sure everyone was on board with the final solution. So it's that process, of kind of a process outside of a process that just adds to confusion and doesn't allow the citizen or resident who's engaging to know when to engage and when not to engage and sort of turn that on and off.
Okay, let's move on to topic 2, reports on external boards and commissions. It's kind of a collapsing of our commissioner check-in that we're not going to have this afternoon. So did anyone have a committee report they needed to bring to the board? I do not. Commissioner Fournier does not.
I do.
Commissioner Edwards does not. Commissioner Klaus? Nope. Commissioner Mejia?
Yeah, I guess just, I attended the Regional Housing Council, and so we approved a funding request that will be coming in front of the board in January. And also, some of the funding requests, the contract language is going to be a little bit more flexible just to let the award winners know that a lot of the funding is based on state and federal funding. And last year, if you all remember, or this year, if you all remember, the funding came out to be less. And so there was there had to be, a lot of contracts had to be redone because of that. And then later on, we got additional funding, so we were able to cover that. So staff is just concerned we're going to be running into that same issue this year. So they are adding that language into the contracts that they are going to be signing with the award winners. And of course, the board will have an opportunity to see those once they come in front of the board. That is the major thing.
Good. Any questions? No. All right, let's go on then. Thank you, Commissioner Mejia. Let's go to Commissioner items. We have several. First up, Chair and Vice Chair selection process.
Thank you so much, Commissioners. Based on the last conversation we've had, and unless there's any discussion or changes here on the, I mean, you probably should come and sit at the table for the rest of these items. But for the December 17th meeting, we plan to have an item that lists the last two nominees for chair and then list the nominees for vice chair. So we would have a item that has the two different motions for each seat.
I would like to withdraw my nomination for chair.
So then we will have a motion for Commissioner Menzer as chair, and it'll be presented to the board for discussion decision. And then right now for vice chair, we still have, I believe, Commissioner Klaus and Commissioner Fournier as options for vice chair.
And that will be dealt with tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that the board, are there any questions about that? I think that helps because when we go, now we're going to move on to boards and committees, and with the chair being settled, then we don't have any issue there. We can just, should we just move on to that topic then?
Yes.
County Manager? Okay. So I know that there's been, I'll just kind of frame this if I could. I did an initial blush, taking the input that we got initially, but then when everybody saw the layout, Commissioner Mejia had a bunch of really good suggestions, and Commissioner Fournier and I had a couple of trades, I think, that we made, and the Commissioner Klaus and Grant traded. So anyway, I think we've got the latest and greatest iteration. There's a couple of yellow spots, I guess, where nobody, I didn't quite grab that. Nobody.
I'll have the clerk explain
Yeah,
the
so
yellow, but.
We're close, I think, but the question is to look at this and does anybody have any last minute concerns about this doesn't fit, or I'm concerned about this layout?
Before I pass over to the clerk, there was an item, a question about Capitol Lake, Lower Deschutes, regarding that group, and since the ILA has been signed, if that group will fall off. Amy reached out to our state partners, and they said that there's still some work that will be done in 2025.
Yeah, they expect a few more meetings for the funding and possibly another committee there to continue meeting.
Well, the Funding and Governance Work Group, Treasurer Gadman is our representative. So, I mean, I would attend, they like to cast a wide net, and I would be invited, or Commissioner Mejia would be invited as like alternates almost, sort of, but technically, we're not on that group.
I think the treasurer and the county manager could represent the organization, and we can always bring back reports to all of you.
Yeah.
If that's agreement from a majority of the commission, we can strike that one.
I'm in agreement with that.
We got one person.
I agree with that.
Great.
I don't think, I've actually talked to a couple other members, and we do not think this executive committee
Consider it stricken.
until there's funding and
Yep.
different future, hopefully in the future, but not 2025.
So go ahead and explain the yellow.
So the yellows were ones that received multiple requests from commissioners, or that had a blank still, such as the opioid abatement council alternate position.
So if it matters to anyone, I took the liberty of redoing the sort of the weighting, who has the most points, so to speak, or the heaviest assignments. Because when I started, it was perfectly equal, but then with some of the trading, it got slightly unequal. Commissioner Klaus and I have the most points, but a lot of mine are not level one, so to speak, the heaviest community. I just have a lot of lower level. You, Commissioner Klaus, actually has the most level one and the most points, and that's mainly because when you took law and justice back, I didn't remove anything. So you had an average amount, and then throwing law and justice on there put you slightly ahead. Commissioners Fournier, Commissioners Grant, Commissioner Mejia, you guys are exactly equal essentially with sort of the weighted points. So just in terms of, trying to keep balanced workloads, I think I would suggest not to go to Commissioner Klaus, but it would seem like any of the other four of us could potentially take on the Area Agency on Aging and not throw things out of balance too much.
For the opioid abatement council, I know that one is still being worked on. My recommendation would be for Commissioner Grant to be the primary on that one. I know the ILA is still being worked on, but just based on her experience, I think my preference would be for her.
You wanted to be on that? I mean, just Commissioner Grant, you there? Commissioner-elect? Sure.
Yeah, she said she'd be listening in, but may not be as available because of a conflict, but
I think that makes perfect sense to
I mean, it would help because you're ahead of us on all just in terms of that would balance things a little bit better. But Commissioner Klaus, do you want to speak to that?
Well, that is one that I would like to keep. We haven't seen a lot of traction with it this year because of how much still had to be worked out, but I know that staff have put a lot of work into that, and there should be more coming forward next year and in following years, so I've been kind of anticipating that, and I'd like to keep it. I'm not too concerned about the points. I think that I can handle the ones that I've been assigned.
And put it up to a vote. Board.
We could.
Be nice to hear from Rachel.
Yeah, I agree.
I will say one more thing. I gave up the BHASO. I think Commissioner-elect Grant will do a wonderful job at that. Her background and experience align beautifully with that, and I think she'll do a great job. So I didn't really have any heartache giving that one up. But the Opioid Abatement Council is one other way that I have, that I'm able to participate in matters related to the opioid crisis, and it's something that I care about a lot, and I also have a lot of experience working professionally in that area, so I would like to keep that.
It says meetings are to be determined, so that means they're not gonna be happening for a while?
Yeah, we
So-
haven't signed the ILA yet,
Not
so.
even
Why don't we
gotten
just
Can we defer
wait till
on
we
that?
defer on it, and then likely Commissioner Grant will be seated, and we can have a discussion amongst the new commission. Sorry, Commissioner Edwards.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that approach.
I'm
So
not gonna
then-
argue it.
So then let's remove any,
We'll just keep that TBD.
So
that's it.
then we
If the board's
won't
okay
appoint
with that.
anyone then and just have a TBD, is that? Okay.
We'll discuss who to appoint at the time that it gets up and going.
Another arm wrestling competition
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd bring this back early January because the cities, we chatted last week and we will initiate meetings end of January.
Okay, well, then at least we can then get the new board to decide that one, since there's a new commissioner that's being proposed.
Okay.
Any other concerns about assignments? Well, I guess we do need to fill area agency on aging. That's the only really one that's,
It does look like Rachel had it on her list, if I'm reading.
yeah, that's why I was confused of why it was yellow. Oh, Madam Clerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rachel's interested in that.
Okay, Commissioner-elect, did you hear our discussion on the opioid abatement council?
No, I'm sorry, I was listening, and in another meeting at work, so do you,
Do you have a second to explain?
yeah, I got a second.
I was tentatively, Commissioner Klaus was slotted in tentatively. Commissioner Mejia suggested that you'd be a good fit there as well. Commissioner Klaus is still interested in it. Rather than taking it to a vote right now or tomorrow, we decided to, hasn't even really met yet, so we weren't sure your interest or your comfort level with your workload and all that, you know. If you want to weigh in right now and say how you feel about it, great. The other proposal was to decide it in January, closer to the time that the meetings actually start. But do you have interest in that, or would you want?
I do, I definitely have interest in that, and mostly because I didn't hear the conversation. I mean, I probably would be more interested in waiting till January to kind of have that discussion if possible.
All right, let's just do that then.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll decide that later. That'll be to be determined. And Commissioner-elect Grant will be slotted in as primary on area agency on aging, and we need an alternate.
I'm happy to be alternate.
Commissioner Mejia volunteers, thank you. And then that may fill out our chart. Everybody else good?
Do you want to talk about the fair board and kind of,
The proposal was to have commissioners rotate through. Was that your Commissioner Mejia idea?
Yeah.
And I checked with Thomasina, who thought that was acceptable and would make sense.
and so part of my recommendation, if I can explain, so this is, the board serves, commissioners serve mostly as an ex officio member of the fair board. And so at the fair board, we hear reports. I thought it would be great for each of the commissioners to have a relationship with the fair board, to kind of hear what they're working on, hear the progress that they're making, and see that there is investment from the full board into the fair board and the work that they're doing. This is work that volunteers really put their heart and soul into every year, and there's just a lot of work that goes into it. And so I think that recognition, the meetings are held on Wednesdays at 7, so they're a little bit later than just, regular meetings. And so that was one of the reasons why I made the recommendation that it should be on a rotating basis, and each one of us can grab a month that, where we're available. And I'm not sure how that would be decided.
I think that's great. Staff could work with Thomasina to come up with a rotation and bring that back. But I think it provides the opportunity for all commissioners to stay in the know of what's going on with the fair and provide their perspectives and build relationships.
On a slightly related, but slightly unrelated, I had the same idea for the Racial Equity Council. When Commissioner Mejia and I met with the chair, he wasn't sure about that, but if we're not going to assign a commissioner to it, and that may not be what we do, then I might bring the idea back, because I think the same thing that you just described for the Fair Board would be really cool for the Racial Equity Council, just to keep commissioners, all of us showing commitment, all of us showing, like, being able to be seen there and just listening. Ex officio, obviously, but anyway, side point, but the same kind of, I do like the idea of that. So, okay.
So we'll come up with a rotation and just send that out to the board.
Work with the EAs to figure out who goes when. Thank you, good idea. Anything else, Madam Clerk, on the,
No,
any other holes you need to fill?
that fills
Okay.
it.
And then we just do a motion to accept the, it's like a real simple motion to accept the committees as laid out on the attachment A or whatever we call it.
Unofficial agenda?
Yeah, on the agenda. Yeah, an official agenda. We do boards and officers kind of.
Together.
A little chunk. Quick motion, simple.
Do we have time to add that to the 17th, or will we bring it first? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, then let's go on to the 2025 board meeting calendar. That's not the schedule, right? That's the calendar.
Correct. They really go hand in hand, but we wanted to bring this back,
Okay, they go hand in hand. Okay, good.
the larger sheet, largely to look at the fifth week. We've added that board meeting back in.
Okay.
There are 3 months next year that have a fifth Tuesday.
Okay, and then on the calendar, I would just, I know couple of commissioners have asked me about spring break week, and it looks like you've adjusted that because I saw that there's no meeting scheduled on April 1st like there would typically be. Okay, so just heads up on that for folks. Because we were worried about a quorum, there'll be a meeting on,
And it's better to do that than to have a meeting and then cancel it, because folks, our departments are banking on the board meetings, and if they think it's gonna happen, they start planning whatever contract or services they're working on, and for it to cancel really puts them under pressure. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that feedback and the clerk facilitating that. Good job.
perfect, and we definitely filled those back in with the fifth, sorry. Okay, any questions from the board on meeting schedule or calendar?
How do you facilitate this? Is this also a board item? Or does this happen here with a thumbs up?
Yeah, this is just,
Okay, I got one thumb. Actually, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
no legislative action has ever been taken on something like that.
This is it. Good.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the policy pieces that we have, which are, first up, code of conduct. Do you have copies?
Copies were provided in the.
So appreciate your team's perspectives. All of them, I think, did some research, worked hard on looking at these documents. Appreciate the assistant county managers and Maria, who's unwell with her vacation right now, for their perspectives on putting this together. What you have is, I think the clerk passed out a red line, the comments, and then a clean version. We also passed out comments from Commissioner-elect Grant, who provided a document with some of her thoughts. So from our perspective, we're ready to adopt the ones that were worked on with staff aides and the comments they provided. I think a lot of them were good perspectives. Obviously, this is not the only time these policies will have to be updated, but we have to have a starting point. We know that there's additional policies that have to be created, and then we will roll those into citing within the documents themselves as we build the infrastructure going forward.
Commissioner Edwards.
I'm just gonna look towards our new commissioner. If she's okay with it, then I'm okay with it, because it's not gonna affect me. So, if she
So
get-
can I ask on her, I saw the email attached and like, was that just an alternate, for our to think about, or was it somehow incorporated
It
or?
wasn't incorporated because she had removed sections that the majority of you didn't remove.
Okay,
And so I think the opportunity we have is we can always adjust it once she's seated. She feels strongly about those items. Again, these are not a once and done. These are going to be things that we are working on as an organization to fine tune and adjust as dynamics change.
so I'll just throw out like the one, I mean, could go through here and, wordsmith, but the one major substantive thing that I brought up was the confidentiality. Confidentiality was just making sure it's clear what is covered, because, in the comment, what do you call this, red line comment, or in the comment, somebody cited the Kirkland definition, and like, whether that's the right definition or not, like, that's what would help me, something like that is what would help me then, feel like it's clear, then, especially when we're, can't do this, can't do that with it, do that with what, like, I mean, to say that, in our proposal, to say that all employee and constituent information, data records, may be considered privileged information, I mean,
Too broad.
it's too broad, then there's these really strict rules about what I do with it, but if I don't know what it is at the outset, then I'm nervous about being so strict about what I do with it. What is it? Anything I learn, I mean, so in the Kirkland example, it says confidential information, information gained by reason of their official position other than for a city purpose. It means, number one, specific information rather than generalized knowledge that is not available to a person who files a public records request. And two, information made confidential by law. Again, that may not be the right perfect definition, but that's more what I wanted to see so that I can think about that when I have a piece of information and know, hey, that I cannot share this with anyone.
Sure.
Versus just our broad statement, which I think just leads to gray areas.
That was my exact concerns on that particular one. So you articulated that well.
Yeah, and so I know, me and Taylor looked at different counties and cities, proposals, and that was one of the ones that came up on helping define that. And so not sure exactly how we can tie that in.
I mean, I think and I hear what you're saying, Chair, if you give staff direction to move forward with this, but incorporate definitions, we'll do that and then send it out to everyone with those definitions.
And like, can legal, will be reviewing that
Absolutely.
definition?
Yep.
Commissioner Grant, did you have anything on this? I know you spent some good time, and I actually thought your proposals were pretty clean and clear to me, but I didn't know quite what to do with them because they were kind of parallel.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with, I just wanted to send in, some examples if anyone wanted to try to wordsmith or update anything. I haven't seen the new one, if there is a new one. But I guess my question is, if we give them permission to go back and if you guys could decide to have them go back and update anything else, then when will this be officially voted on? Like now or after I get into office?
Yeah, at this point, we can wait until January to bring it back.
Okay.
It's a high priority board item, but there's no timeline per se, is my understanding.
We go on winter break after tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it back the first week of January.
Is that acceptable to the board?
Well, I mean, yeah.
I
Can't make them retroactive.
Yeah. Is there anything, go ahead, Commissioner
Well,
Edwards.
I thought we were gonna we've had the possibility of meetings yet to be scheduled or something on,
That's still being worked out with the team and the time frame about if there will be an executive session or if one is needed.
Are there other than that issue about definition of confidential information, are there other Commissioner proposed tweaks or concepts they wanted to discuss? I didn't have anything major. I guess my next on my list, if I were making a list of things, is like on a code of conduct, item 11 says exercise appropriate judgment in all work matters. I don't really know what that means. If it's too broad, it doesn't really mean anything. And this to me borders on not meaning anything because it just doesn't exercise appropriate judgment in all work matters. How would that come up to
I think
matter?
the first part of our meeting this morning was an
Yeah.
example that maybe could have been prevented.
anyway, I don't have a I don't have,
Especially with newer people.
I don't have any heartburn with it if somebody feels it's a good thing to have in there, but I just thought.
We can add some definition to it as well and run it by the attorneys and obviously share it with all of you in advance before we bring it back.
I mean, it's just a guide, it's not binding.
Well, the last
Right.
is the.
I-
Go ahead, Jane.
Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Ty, on that. I mean, I think that was maybe some of my bigger concerns is that, you know, each of these guidelines kind of need to be laid out, like what is appropriate? Like what's the definition of appropriate? Or where do we look to define appropriate? Because essentially, you know, these will be used if ever needed in the future, you know, as really, are we following the code of conduct or not? Like, and how would you decide if something was appropriate or not? Who, you know, and so that, I think that was one of my concerns, is that there just needs to be a little more clarification and specificity around, you know, some of these words that are used in this. That's my only comments on here, so.
Also argue that those things evolve over time and change over time, and the board as a group kind of establishes those, you know, kind of social and professional expectations, you know, differently every decade probably. So, you know, kind of like the process or scenario we've been going through, when we look at a certain situation, we as a board would come together and say, yeah, that's outside of, you know, what we would expect you know, your conduct to be. So, you know, I could see it as, you know, like I said from the start, the only regulation is kind of self-regulation that we have amongst ourselves. And so it's hard to do it, and it takes courage to do it for everybody to get together and say, hey, whoa, you acted in a way that was, you know, unbefitting your office. You know, that's not, if you specify that too much, that, you know, that might create more issues than if, you know, instance by instance or decade by decade, we get together as the board gets together and specifies what that looks like.
Sure. I would agree with that completely. And I think that maybe you know, in my mind, I was kind of hoping maybe when we get to our February retreat or something like that, that our board, you know, would be able to lay out those norms, like the commissioner norms, or what is our appropriate, and decide that as a group. And you know, and that makes sense to me. I would also agree with you though that it shouldn't be too, you know, we don't need to lay out like rules, but there just needs to be a way for all of us to agree that this is what we've deemed appropriate at this time, you know, in this moment in time for this year, for this group of people, and just to be able to have, you know, think, like I would say, for an example, you know, laying out a norm of, you know, well, I'm not going to use an example, but I just think that we should consider, you know, what is the norm for this group of commissioners, and kind of set those out as guidelines, but not in the code of conduct.
Yeah.
I also,
Yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say, I agree with the, having some definitions laid out. Because if not, then, we all have different ways of defining things or what we think something means. And it shouldn't be laid up to question, and hearing, you know, Commissioner Fournier's, but even if it's a little bit broader, just having some structures of definitions, I think would be appropriate, especially as we're talking about confidentiality expectations and code of conduct.
That I agree with, but I will be curious if anyone can come up with a definition of appropriate judgment that means anything.
Well, you know,
Maybe,
I think
but-
that's up to the board to decide as
I know what
commissioners.
isn't.
I mean, you can come up with examples, but in terms of trying to, yeah.
We'll play with adding some definition there. I think we'll try to strike the balance by doing more than what we have, but not get so prescriptive that then it creates well, that's not the only I checked the list and it wasn't there, so I could do it.
It's like this is, if you'll indulge me with a quick story, as a law student, I did a program called Street Law and where law students go into inner city high schools and teach about and we do an exercise called No Vehicles in the Park. And you basically get a group of students and you say, should people be able to, drive vehicles through the park? And, no, of course not. Okay, no vehicles in the park. And then you just come up with example, like whatever they try to do with the law, they make it more specific. You show how that's not fair to a certain group. And they try to broaden it out and you show how that's not going to capture all the things that they want to prohibit. And it's an awesome exercise to get people to understand like how laws work and how, the more specific you get, the more you exclude things you want to capture, and the more broad you get, you capture things you didn't intend to capture. And this is an example of that where, it's just.
It's perfect analogy to what we're dealing with here. We have nothing right now.
Yeah.
So the board can say, well, we want more definition, and I get that, but we have to put something in place that you could always work and bring it back up annually to review and refine.
Yeah.
It probably should be part of an annual board retreat where we're looking at some of these things and drivers and guidelines for the organization. My recommendation is, based on the current circumstance and situation, we get something's always better than nothing.
Have a starting point.
Yeah, I don't have a problem keeping it there. I just thought I would just raise that for discussion.
But we will, because we have time and we're not bringing this back till January, we'll work with the legal team to provide some definition without going overboard and trying to move away from being too vague. So I definitely hear the comments.
Okay. Does that bring us to, Commissioner Fournier, let's go to your item then. Go to Commissioner item.
I'm not sure if everybody saw it, but it seemed like it was a hot topic. There was an email that was sent out right before we came down here. And I had Matt run off copies. I know I read it.
I have not read it, seen it.
And I don't know exactly how to tee it up or how to talk about it, but I think we need to make place to talk about this.
I didn't see a copy either.
Is this the county manager's one? You sent some other stuff down here. Is that the internal audit? Wayne, is that internal audit stuff?
Oh, that was an accident.
Okay. Okay, so I've got one and you've got one and apparently the county manager.
Yeah, I don't know how to tee this up. I don't know, I'm not trying to create a weird situation, but I don't want to ignore this email either when we don't have a lot of meetings on the agenda coming up. So maybe we can read this and talk about it tomorrow, or we can talk about it right now, or I don't know if it's an executive session topic.
Can we take 5 minutes and read it quick and then continue on?
Sure. I'm gonna take.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read it. So let's at least do that and then
I haven't read it either. I hate to start.
So let's just take a 5-minute break.
Let's reconvene at 11:45. We're in recess.
Good, thank you.
back from a recess. It's 11:45. We're taking up a commissioner item raised by Commissioner Fournier based on an email received by the board, 4 members of the board to, from the county manager. And Commissioner Fournier, I'll let you address your item.
Yeah, I wanted to put this on the table. This was something that was sent out just prior to our meeting this morning, and it was titled regarding some workplace concerns brought forward by the county manager regarding interactions with the commissioner. There are some specific recommendations in here, and some of the concerns I think are pressing and, you know, important that we talk about. And I just wanted to put on the table following or I want to do more than just acknowledge the recommendations. I want to make sure that we're talking them out and possibly authorizing the county manager to enact the recommendations.
Commissioner Edwards?
I guess my concern is that going postal is real. And if we don't address this adequately and something does happen, we're in a serious liability situation. And it would only be enhanced by us looking the other way. And I really think that
Commissioners, based on the, sorry to interrupt, based on the nature of this, is this something to ask Travis if this is an executive session conversation?
I think it's worth asking Travis, for sure. He's here. Let's.
I'm not sure how I can help, but.
So Travis has almost zero information on any of this, but since he was in the building, I wanted to engage. His guidance is that we bring in other more closely related attorneys to the conversation. He is not at this time able to engage on a topic that he's unaware of.
Yeah. Well, then the question really, Travis, is, I understand you would engage, but is this something that the board could go into executive session to discuss?
Under the official conduct exemption? I haven't seen the letter, and so it's challenging for me to understand the topic here. Yeah.
Want to take another 10 minutes? So we're not all staring at him when he reads.
I may need a sec here. It's more than one page here. Yeah.
It's definitely worth looking at. So I think we ought to take a few minute break if that's what the council needs.
I'm also thinking about being respectful of your time too.
I don't think our time is as near as important as dealing with this right now. That's my position.
Where I'm at as well is to see if my colleagues, Jane and Julie, are available to provide advice to you all. Given that they've been providing you advice in the past, and that may be, you know, I could certainly, I'll need a little time to read this and see if we can maybe have them available. But is this, just so that I'm aware, is this something that you all want to discuss at this point, or can we wait for another day?
I want to discuss this at this point because it's an issue. And I don't know if you heard when I was talking, when you were walking in maybe. Going postal is a real issue that many workplaces have had to deal with. The result of going postal, and when I say going postal, where an employee has just absolutely brought death and destruction on an organization. And I think if we don't address this, if we postpone it for 10 minutes is fine. But I think we need to look into this right now, today, because we are exposing ourselves to terrible liability if something goes haywire here.
I should understand the urgency. The only thing I'm holding back on is I want to make sure you get the proper advice.
There's concerns that the county manager brought before us. There's recommendations. I want to make space to talk about if we want to enact those recommendations.
My question to you is should that happen in executive session based on the sensitive nature of this?
Yeah, and there's some trigger language in here. that I think it's very important that you take a look at. A firearm is being mentioned. I just think it's super, super serious.
So I'm clear, I apologize, I'm coming in with zero.
You've been blindsided.
Yeah, you've been
It
blind.
is-
Well, we were all blindsided this morning. I mean, unfortunately, this is brand new.
I understand, so that, but this letter, if I understand that correctly, I see it's written, it's dated the 16th. And is the question before you whether or not you can read it publicly, or I'm trying to understand.
Well, if we should go into executive session to discuss it, but I do think you ought to just take the 10 minutes to read it, Council.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good start, yeah.
Okay, and then we can come back in,
All right.
if that's okay, the chair. And
10
staff
minutes,
and the
yeah,
rest
that's
of us.
fine, that's okay.
I mean, you can't hardly expect council to make any comment on something he has no idea.
I think the question is, there's probably aspects of this that pertain to active litigation. Those conversations pertaining to that litigation would have to be in executive setting with legal counsel. There's other aspects of this that are your prerogative as commissioners to be able to talk about whatever it is that's on folks' minds. There's probably a space where we need to make clear what should and shouldn't be discussed in a public setting. I'm not quite certain I can provide that advice that quickly and on the fly without consulting with my colleagues that are more engaged in this particular issue. So my suggestion is I can reach out now to see if they can review. And just a question is, has this been circulated to our office?
It'd be good for them to have it, but there's specific management requests in there that are not necessarily anything to do with litigation or anything like that. That's like, just from a crisis standpoint, like the first thing that I want to talk, there are management requests that are being given to the commission. And I think the county manager is looking for some authorization, some support in some positions, enacting some type of protocols when it comes to meeting with staff, so I would read that, but I think that it's mostly an issue of, does the board acknowledge these recommendations, and is there an opportunity for us to say, yes, we accept your recommendations and we would like to see them taken into action. And I don't know if that's legal review, that's more policy.
And we're trying to guide your conversation. I mean, ultimately, what we need to make sure is that we're following the right protocol and engaging this conversation. It's not to say you can't have it, right? I am, again, I understand the urgency, but if this can wait a day, I think we could provide those sideboards.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything like this, and if the idea is that I'm gonna vote on adopting recommendations today,
Most of them
that's
are
pretty wild.
management
So-
rights, I would say anyways.
Okay.
Some, maybe 75% of those are management rights in administrative issues, but I think that,
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to manage how to move forward the process, and Travis needs to read it. He wants to get counsel, where I can tell you, I want to talk to county manager, I want to talk to my colleague. I mean, I'm not going to vote on any of this stuff today, so why can't we give council a day
Well, for me,
to at least get ready to,
some of the
give us the right
recommendations
advice.
are things that we need to have anyway, like a zero tolerance workplace violence policy. I think that's just a good thing to have for everyone. I
do
think,
we have to decide today?
not today, but I think some of the recommendations are just good. I mean, I would,
Yeah, I mean, I wrote okay next to a lot of it, and concerns about a couple of others,
more
but
discussion on
we
it.
need to, I don't quite know why this is being teed up in this way.
I do. I think we've had a miserable working relationship for the last few months. And this is kind of
This
bringing
isn't
it to
helping.
a head.
Yeah, this isn't helping.
if it
Well,
was
it may
teed
not
up
be helping, but
improperly,
it might conclude it.
I apologize. It was something that just, it's something that I, you know, some of those issues are pressing, and I don't want to sit on something. I'm not saying we take action right now, but I didn't want to walk away not having put this on the table and started the discussion.
Yeah, fair. I mean, if we want to talk about how to tee up the discussion, you know, about this, fine, but I mean, I don't think we need to give like 8 minutes and then have Travis come back and
Yeah.
let's adopt all the recommendations. I mean, that's not where I'm gonna be able to, I'm not gonna
Well,
be able to.
even to have additional discussion, whether we should have that in executive session or
Yeah, I
not,
wanna know
is
that.
what I would like to hear from council
So my
after.
10-minute request was, let the guy read it, and then
Yeah.
if he comes in and says, well, stop
Yeah.
the presses,
Okay.
you
Let
know,
us
these
know. I mean-
specific concerns, or, hey,
We're obviously all fired up about this right now. This is brand new to us. We'd like to have it be brand new to you, so you could at least know what we're fired up about. This is a bad deal.
So should we take till 12:10?
Yeah.
Recess 14 minutes?
Yeah.
Come back and
Read it quick
give
and
us
sit
whatever
back in
advice
here
you
with
can,
us.
you feel like you can give us, and after 14 minutes of reading and thinking. I mean, I don't know, is that how everybody like to proceed?
Then we maybe
Okay,
can
we're-
ask you something and you can at least respond. to
And
know.
you may
How can
say that-
respond?
We need a day.
I may still end up, Commissioner, I may end up there
Understood.
again when I
But
read
let's
it,
just
but I
come
will.
back
Sure,
at 12:10
I'll
and
take a
and
look
make
at
that
it.
decision. Thank you.
Thank you very
Be in
much.
recess.
No problem.
Let's go find you an office.
It's 12:20. We were in recess and now we're picking back up. We're still on our last piece of the agenda and we're picking back up with council who had a chance to review our
So the
memo.
council and assistant county manager, myself, had a chance to engage with the clerk, and I think that the clerk, starting us off in the conversation would be helpful.
I think the question on the table right now is whether or not this discussion can be held in an executive session. RCW 4230-110F states to receive and evaluate complaints or charges brought against a public officer or employee. However, upon the request of such officer or employee, a public hearing or a meeting open to the public shall be conducted upon such complaint or charge. So it is our understanding that the discussion does fall within an executive session.
That's for the board's consideration and the county manager.
Can you repeat the RCW? What do you mean?
4230-110-1F.
So is the proposal that we now go into executive session?
That's for the discussion of the board. We believe that it's covered under RCW for executive session.
That would be my recommendation, board, as a county manager, that if
I
you
would
do
follow
want-
that recommendation. Concurrence?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go into executive session pursuant to 42.
Just 1 second, please, sir. And then the second piece of that is the appropriate legal counsel and human resources officers also need to be included in this conversation, is our recommendation. And those folks are not currently at the table.
Okay.
Is anyone from Human Resources
I've not had
available?
a chance to engage yet. We wanted to have this conversation.
He is out on vacation, and
When we've gone into executive session under this RCW before, we have not had HR necessarily present, but we have had legal
Yeah,
counsel.
we don't wanna wait for
Okay.
Maria to get back.
You don't need legal counsel as well. I mean, I know.
I know we don't need it, but.
Right. It may be advisable, and I gotta tell you, I'd be the wrong legal counsel for this session, given my lack of background in this subject matter. I would have the assigned attorneys working with you on this one if you're.
and I think that's fair to cut Travis loose, and then the board can decide in executive session if they want to continue to, we can tie in other legal counsel, but I don't want to put him in a spot where he's not able not only to advise, but it's not his, it's not necessarily his area of focus and expertise.
And so county manager, if you do want legal counsel present at an upcoming, and we could certainly try to look at the calendar if it's something soon, I would recommend sending this out to Jane Futterman and John Thunheim as well.
Will do.
Yeah.
Thank you for that direction. But the board wanted to have an initial conversation. My recommendation is an executive session. We have the attorney agreeing that we can do that. I appreciate staff's recommendation, so it's the board's call if they want to step into that executive session to talk about this.
There is the component that the individual that the complaint is about has the option to, what is the words? To say whether they approve of us having the executive session or not, it's something to that effect.
You wanna read it again?
Oh, it was, yeah.
It's, however, upon the request of such officer or employee, a public hearing or a meeting open to the public shall be conducted upon such complaint or charge.
So only
I think
if,
you can have the executive session.
Unless that person says, no, you
No,
can't.
I'm not reading that to say, a person can't stop us having an executive session. They could, additionally
Okay.
have a public meeting regarding the same charge.
Right.
On top of.
Well, if there's no opposition to us holding it from that person, then
So, sounds like the will of the board is to go into executive session without counsel to discuss some aspect of the complaint. Is that correct? Okay,
Seems like it.
so we're gonna go
And
into,
it seems like the focus of that executive session, which would be Commissioner Klaus, has the opportunity to say if she wants to be involved in it, or if the public should be involved in it. So if the public should be involved in it, we don't need to be in executive session. We just have an open decision.
well, I think we
Sounds-
still have the right to have the executive session regardless of whether Commissioner Klaus would like an additional session open to the public.
Okay.
That's my read. Travis, did I have that right?
Okay, give it up.
Yeah, I have it up.
Yeah, I think that's largely correct, that you can have that conversation in confidence and a request can be made. Such officer or employee.
Okay, so should I then give the advisement, set this up? How long do we want to estimate for this discussion? 20 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds right?
You can always extend it.
Okay, so we're going to go into executive session pursuant to RCW 423110.
Chair, if I could,
Yes.
do you want to have this without legal counsel? What is, because I'm
You're excused.
I'm not prepared to.
That's what he just said.
You're excused, Travis.
So you're gonna have this
We're going to have this
internally?
without legal counsel.
Okay.
It may be short because we find out we need legal counsel or
Well, that's right, and if you identify it, then I would
And we
suggest.
know who to go to.
And we'll have to schedule that with, as you say, Prosecutor Thunheim and
And-
Futterman.
Deputy Futterman, yeah.
Deputy Futterman, okay. But at this juncture, we're gonna move into it's 1F, to receive and evaluate complaints or charges brought against public officer or employee. And so we're gonna estimate 20 minutes, and that will take us to 12:46.
12:26.
Okay, it's 12:48. We're out of our executive session. Majority of the board asked for this to be addressed. We ran out of time essentially, and so there's a majority of the board would like to have this addressed tomorrow. We're going to invite legal counsel to that. HR, we know, is not available because of scheduled leave, but the session will happen at a time to be determined based on availability. We've got other things going on, so we'll have to slot it in. So stay tuned for that. Anything else?
This is our last meeting for today.
This is the board's last meeting for today.
Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're at the end of the agenda and we're adjourned.